5:15 regularly scheduled school board meeting. I call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let the record show that Amy Tilton has an excused absence tonight. Moving right along. Not seeing any members of the public at this time. We'll skip the initial public comment period. Are there any board comments or committee updates? I do just want to say thanks to Dan for filling in and having the agenda meeting with Todd while I was away, which actually brings up another point. If anybody in the board is interested in attending an agenda setting meeting with me or having one in lieu of me, they're certainly welcome to. It's a good experience to go through. And probably all of us should be aware of the process we go through. So,
Most enlightening.
any other comments, updates, committee meetings? No? All right, moving right along. We will start with the superintendent report.
Well, thank you, Gary. Tim, is this mic on? Am I okay? Yeah, well, thank you. A handful of things I wanted to report on. First off, obviously, it's August 10th, and just 2 short weeks from today, our staff return to begin setting up for the start of the 23-24 school year, and obviously students start that following Monday. So I did want to just kind of talk about some things we're thinking about as we approach the start of school. I met Tuesday with the leadership of First Student Bus, that is our bus company, to kind of review where things are at. One of the things that they said to us is they see Newmarket as their shining star, because one of the things that really, this predates me, but I suspect many of you on the board were part of this decision, but during the pandemic, a decision was made by the Newmarket School District to, even when the drivers were not able to provide transportation services, we continued to support and pay driver salaries during that time, which allowed us to keep drivers loyal to us, who then came back when we resumed school. And the drivers have not forgotten that. And so when it comes to them finding drivers for Newmarket, they generally are in a really good place. That being said, we are down 1 driver for the fall. They have things very well figured out with regards to how the routes are going to run, but we are down 1. So what it does mean is after-school sports runs, again, are going to be a challenge for First Student. Fortunately, we have a very creative athletic director who has developed a really good relationship with another private company, and we're into contract with that, so we are able to provide after-school transportation for sports and so forth as well. So that's good news. Paraprofessional staffing, we continue to advertise. We've added a few since the last time I met with you, but clearly we still are very much in need of para-educators. I'm hopeful in the very near future. I met with the NSSA leadership, and they're going to do a promotional video to recruit paras to come work for us. They can work with Tim to do that. Hopefully we'll have that out by the middle of next week. We're trying to recruit people to come join us. But again, if anybody out there is thinking they might want to work in a school, please come and check out our website. We have openings for paraprofessionals. Other thing I wanted to mention with regards to opening of school, the one position that we are struggling specifically on, the industrial technology position at the junior senior high, as I mentioned, Venera Gattonini took a job at another school district, so we do not currently have a teacher for that position. I'm sure it's not a surprise to anybody that there aren't a lot of people with that skill set out there, and so we are still working to try to solve that problem. But Andy and his team are looking at options for how we can meet student needs if in fact we are not successful in hiring somebody. But believe me, we haven't given up hope. We're still trying, but I just want to put that out there as something for people to think about. Last thing I want to mention on the subject of just planning ahead for school opening, we did have our second full-day leadership retreat yesterday with the whole leadership team. spent the day. We actually reviewed the approved school board goals. We talked about those, and then the leadership team built their goals around with the board goals as sort of the starting point of establishing what our goals were. So they're very much in concert. Once we have those tightened up, I will share those with you so you can see kind of where your goals were, where the building level goals are, and I think what I hope is going to happen is there'll be a real synergy between all of those goals, kind of all heading in the same direction, which makes great logical sense, but it does require some planning and thinking ahead, and I feel pretty good that we've done that. So that's all I have to say about just the opening of school. Did want to mention a couple of other things. In fact, Andrew raised it with me earlier. You may have heard there is Governor Sununu has signed into law a law dealing with sealed meeting minutes and right-to-know requests. Effective October 3rd, there is a new law in place that basically says at minimum every 10 years you have to review sealed meeting minutes, and the board would have to conduct a vote to choose to keep them closed if in fact that's what you're going to do. Not having that vote automatically makes them open to public record. I do have Patty Banfield doing a thorough search through all of our records to determine how many sets of sealed meeting minutes we have. And I think it's a subject for a policy committee to take a look at. As soon as the New Hampshire School Board Association has a recommended policy on it, we probably should take a look at it.
Is that the law, that start date on that, or is that like going back
Our
to
grace
like
period.
2020s?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Well, I think that's what I'm kind of waiting for some guidance on. Technically, what does it mean? I mean, basically, the law goes into effect October 3rd. That's what I know, and I know that you, even if you don't have a policy on it, at the most it can be as 10 years. You can have a policy that says less than that, but I don't know how far back you're going to go. And I do have Patty doing a historical look, going back as far as we can get to determine that. I'm hoping the technical guidance that will come from the School Board Association and the DOE will give us some idea of how far back we need to go, because until someone asked to see minutes from a 1977 board meeting, I wouldn't have any reason to know that they were sealed.
Well, and potentially every single minutes from 10 years plus on that date would be automatically open.
Right.
If we had met
If we do not consciously
So you'd think
review
there'd
them and
be
make a
a-
decision.
And it almost feels like we
Period
like,
of-
like the system as we seal minutes, like having some record of like, here's all the sealed
Yep.
minutes.
Yep.
They have
I think
barely
I'll-
get the system started, yeah.
Yeah, I think ultimately it would be a good thing for us to take a look at that and adopt a practice around it. I think that makes sense. So I just wanted to mention that. A couple of other items that I wanted to mention to you. The IRS matter that we have been sort of wrestling with going back to 2017, it ties into some 1095C reports that were, from the IRS's standpoint, not filed in a timely manner, which, by the way, we have evidence that we did file them in a timely manner, but we can't get the IRS to agree that our evidence of the filing meets their standard. We did hear from the IRS last week telling us that they were denying our appeal. Just to refresh your memory, we had engaged Maggie Hassan's office and their tax advocate, and they were fighting the fight for us, and we had pulled together a lot of information. But in the end, the IRS, in their process, rejected it. In the rejection, we were told that starting September 6th, we will start accruing late fees if we don't pay the fee. We did. Janet and I met with a tax lawyer who was recommended to us, who is supposed to be the best in the state, to just discuss the potential for our prevailing in a more of a legal challenge. He felt very strongly that everything that we had spoke very well of how we've handled it, and that there seems to be a very likely success. So we are working with him to get some recommendations on how to move forward. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. You may recall when we made the decision about fund balances, one of the things Janet told you about was we put a little bit extra in the retained fund balance, specifically in case we had a liability that we, so So I just wanted to mention that to you. The last thing I wanted to mention was we had our audit the first week of August. And in the course of the audit, it was discovered that the town had paid more revenue to us than they were required to. Basically, what had happened is the payment schedule that we gave to the town was more than it should have been. So we get to the end. Basically, what it boils down to is the town has paid us about $1.4 million more this year to date than they should have. I met with Steve Fournier and Bill Tappan, as well as Jana. We reviewed the situation. The solution is very simple. The amount that they have overpaid is equivalent to the monthly allotment that they pay us. So basically what's going to happen is the town will not pay us in September. We'll be back equal. And then we all agreed that when the new tax rate is set and the recalculation is done in November, we'll all come together and make sure that we're all in agreement as to what it is. I believe Steve already mentioned it to the town council, but I wanted to make sure that you all heard it. I would like to emphasize that the auditor said there's nothing anomalous about it. It's not going to show up as anything negative in our audit. It's simply we got revenue earlier than we should have. And that's what it came down to. And that is all I have.
Questions on the additional revenues? I mean, obviously, there would be the question on the town side. There'd be a shortfall that might be noticed on our side. Was there a reason we didn't notice a windfall, as it were?
Well, there's a lot of coming and going in the last June, July of the year. Keep in mind we have grant funds coming through. There's a lot coming and going, and initially when the auditor picked up on it, we thought it tied into grant funds, just the way they were being accounted for, but tracing back to the actual calculation of the payment schedule for the town, we discovered that that's where the revenue came from.
It's not like our personal check account where it's fairly static,
No,
I guess, right? Until you reconcile that, you wouldn't even notice a difference.
And I do want to emphasize, just so people listening understand, obviously we have an established budget, and we'll talk about it in a minute when I talk about the higher than expected revenues from the state. We can't just spend that money. So even though we may have had money in our account, it wasn't like we can only spend what we budgeted for. And so basically what occurred was there was money in our bank account that should have been sitting in the town's bank account. Nobody missed out on any services. Nobody was harmed by it. And I think the solution is pretty smooth.
Great, thank you very much. Two presentation items tonight. First up, the joint school board and town council meeting, and we have an agenda Todd passed out, a preliminary agenda if people want to look at that. Have any ideas for additions? It's August 23rd, Town Hall Auditorium, 6 p.m.
Do you want to go ahead?
You want me to just comment on what's on?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Shockingly.
The security part of it is actually going to be it's recommended as a non-public session, and it's largely a review of security protocols and so forth. I think it does tie into some of the conversations we've had about safety egresses and all those things for our meeting spaces, and obviously the town is still using the council chamber, so I think that's the focus of that. The forms of government overview is just a broad overview of how the town functions and how we function. The voting machines discussion actually, we conduct elections at the town, and as does the town, and as you can imagine, there's been a lot of conversation in recent years around voting machine technologies, and so basically what Chris Hawkins is doing is coming to share with us information on the voting machines that he is recommending that we acquire and use. So that's what that is about. And then clearly the other two are the other remaining items are current current projects and town hall discussions, just a matter of sharing information. I know we've talked a little bit about it, but I'm sure we'll hear more about the studies that the town has done and thoughts they have for what they want to do with the town hall and so forth. And then obviously we had an interest in the collaborations idea because that ties into one of the board goals. But again, this is a draft, so if there's anything you don't see there that you want to see on it, we can work to add it.
Should we share what our board goals are and have them share what their council goals are? You know what I mean, like just
certainly
knowing
one of
like
them
what our
tied,
like
yeah.
so that we can like jointly discuss like, hey, like
That's
as
a
a
great
community, how are our goals intersecting?
Because I think one of our goals, as we mentioned when we met with them individually, is that, yeah, we are looking to be more collaborative with them and understand how
Yeah.
the school's going to grow and what we, yeah. So I think it's a great idea.
I don't know if they've even done their goal setting yet.
Well, that's a good point.
But we should-
We can
At
just
least
show
that-
share
them that
ours.
we're
Yeah.
much better than them.
role model.
There
or
you go.
compete.
Just so everybody knows, we do rent the upstairs of the town hall
Yeah.
for some of $1. I know space for the town has been a big issue, and they're looking down the road, and we should also look down the road of what space we may have for an SAU. Todd and I did briefly speak about it. And, you don't foresee any large changes or staffing needs.
I don't see our needs growing, certainly. But yeah, if the town needs to expand, there's not a lot of places they can expand, and that could be, our space could be one of them.
The second two bullets, second and third bullet, I remember them from last year. Like, I think we went, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, I feel like we spent a pretty decent amount of time on both of them. And like the forms of government overview, while like academically interesting, like we've all been through it. Like,
Yeah.
do we like that's like? I just don't want another like
Yeah, I
15
just
to
don't-
20 slide presentation on the form of government.
Yeah, the newest member is Dan, who I'm sure has been through it with the budget committee.
Yeah.
I don't know how many new town council members they have.
They have their own onboarding process too, though, right? So like,
So maybe they've already been through it, so
Yeah.
I'd be fine to strike that.
yeah, I mean, it's good to like an overview maybe, but like I don't think we need a super
I mean,
in-depth presentation on the fact that we were SB2 and the town manager.
Right, that was my initial reaction is, some amount of dog and pony show is probably appropriate for a meeting like this, but let's keep it within what's valuable.
Yeah.
And I know I'm coming in from this from a different perspective, but the security thing,
You've
I-
been through that, I've been through it, I'm sure you've been through
well,
it.
yeah,
I hear
I don't, it was more of a scare thing than it was educational, I felt like. So, I also know I'm coming from a different perspective.
So like, I feel like because that's non-public, we should talk about it maybe in
With the
non-public,
video?
but I do have
Oh, I see what you're saying.
like thoughts on it.
Yep.
I mean, as long as, I don't know if necessarily something for non-public unless it's a specific part of our security aspect.
I don't know,
that
since
you're-
it's a non-public meeting, I feel weird talking about it in public, you know what I mean, like the content of it.
Well, it's only non-public because there's certain processes or items in place for safety of meetings, and I
So,
think Andrew's point is some of the videos that we've watched are probably a bit needlessly graphic, and you found
I didn't see the point.
I would much rather a succinct, again, tactical, operational, like, here are the things you can do, and like, and move on. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
that
know,
makes sense.
Yeah, I'm also not in that field, so I don't know
Yeah.
what's
I
necessary.
don't
so.
want to impugn anyone's motivations, but I appreciate and I get and I think it's valuable that we do things to keep our town meetings safe. Nobody needs to sell me that.
Yeah.
I'm on board. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm not imputing anyone's motivations or assuming like that.
Yeah.
All done with best of intentions. I'm just wondering, like,
So maybe we could ask maybe a condensed.
Yeah,
version of the presentation.
I absolutely will talk with Steve about that.
That makes sense. Yeah, because you're right. I mean, ultimately, a video of what could happen isn't necessarily going to change our.
I can hop on YouTube
on
to
safety and
see if I want
yeah,
to.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. So I agree.
The other thought I had in looking at this, and maybe it's kind of subsumed a little implicitly in some of these, is, and I don't would really appreciate thoughts from everybody else on how to word this or structure it, but just some discussion about whether the school district and the town council has sort of a common view of what is the objective, what's good for the town, what's good for the taxpayer. And again, part of the reason I bring this up is I was looking at some minutes from one of the zoning board meetings, looking for something totally unrelated, and I just saw a comment from a developer who is working on bringing forth a project in town, and there was a comment to the effect of, oh, well, this development won't have any impact on the town because it's aimed towards older people who have no children. I'm like, well, I don't know. Do we agree that that doesn't have an impact on the town? Do we agree that that's a favorable impact? And I have my own bias as to what I think the math says, but I don't think there's much commonality of vision about what it means to have, a retirement development versus a 55-plus development versus a development that's actually geared toward families with small children. Each of those is going to have different impacts on the town and the taxpayers. And I worry that some people are taking it as an article of faith that one type has more or less of an impact without having talked about it and actually thought about what the math says.
So impact, yes, and just vision for the community.
That too.
Right, which gets to like our board goal of like, hey, like what are like the demographic shifts, which I think is like us just trying to like properly react to how the demographics are shifting. But you're absolutely right, in the planning, zoning, master planning, there's a way to shape the direction of the community, and having a shared vision is 55 plus everywhere something we want, or do we want to encourage more like housing that would encourage bringing students in? I'm not saying one or the other. I'm saying there should be a discussion about it. I think the master plan is the time and place for it. So like I wonder how this board, I know that we're gonna have a representative, right, in the master plan.
I neglected to do the email I was supposed to do, but I'm sure
Well, the bureaucracy won't stop
I thought of that
us.
while on vacation. But yeah, I'm sure we'll have a representative. at some point.
Yeah, but I agree that there's a shared vision.
And maybe shared vision, given that we're starting from a really early stage of this, may be too aggressive. I'd be happy if we all just had a general sense of what the tax math says. And from conversations that I've had, I'm a little worried that people have ideas that may or may not align with reality. And those people, by the way, include me.
Mm-hmm.
I may or may not have the math right in my head.
I'll say from a CIP perspective, absolutely, right? Like, there's a whole bunch of like great projects that get brought forward, but then it's like, okay, what does the math meet out? And like, how do we like ensure that which another thing that I'm interested in, and again, this maybe gets to our collaboration. I know the town council sees like, and this is not like delinquencies on taxes, payment and everything, and like, there's a whole bunch of stuff. We aren't legally allowed to see that. But understanding, like, hey, are people able to like pay their bills, their tax bills, or are they not? Like, what's the like ebb and flow of that look like? Would be helpful for us to understand, like, hey, are we overburdening? Because we all probably have different assumptions as to what tax rate the town can handle. Some data showing us, like, yep, people are able to absorb this, or like, oh no, like there's something happening, like would be helpful. Otherwise, we're just going to come with our own assumptions.
Well, even just like with the communication, like at the backyard on Monday, the town council had a table there, and I think it was more for them to try and get people on the committees that have vacancies. But I was like, it would be kind of nice if that's a welcome space for the town council. Like, it would have been nice to have the opportunity as like a school board to have a representative there as well. And I just think it just shows kind of like the lack of communication.
But I mean, we probably could have. I mean, I didn't specifically think about having us. That we, did facilitate some communication with the community and certainly worked with them on planning. But to that point,
but they proactively reached out to. They thought I was the Veterans Committee chair. Still, they reached out to me as the Veterans Committee chair, asking me to be there to do it. And I'm like, I'm not the chair anymore. But so like, they were reaching out to committees proactively to be at that.
Oh, really?
We weren't asked to the prom.
I think it's
Standing by the wall.
I think you're right. The master plan is the right form for that, but as I hate to say, leaders of the community, the school and the town are, boards are leaders of the community. So I think it's appropriate us for maybe have a discussion about our thoughts towards, future development. I know talking with the town manager and town planner, we all agree that 55 plus communities aren't great because you're losing vibrancy, you're losing future citizens.
They have a place.
Yeah, absolutely. They do have a place, absolutely. I think we may have filled that niche in our community, and clearly we need some more students and maybe continue the vibrancy, but I don't think it hurts for a board to say out loud to the community, this is what we're interested in, discuss it more during the master plan
Yeah.
process, but.
I totally agree that like we can wait for the master plan, but that makes no sense to be like, we can't share our ideas until like there's the master plan. Like this seems like a great forum. I totally am on board with you and Dan's. I just share what our visions are so that we get like, hey, are we aligned here? Are we moving forward in the same direction?
And I think that's good for the planning committee to even hear from,
Absolutely.
our collective group.
In the visions, and just to make sure that people just understand the math as we see it, which is, Andy, I know, feels pretty confident that we could flex the enrollment of the school 10% in either direction, and it really wouldn't have an impact on staffing, because we're staffed around programming as opposed to some rigid aim at class sizes. So if you believe that, and if you understand that our adequacy aid is a function of how many students we have in the building, then increasing enrollment puts downward pressure on the tax rate, all other things being equal.
Yep.
And I mean, all other things will never be equal. That's not the world we live in, but at least let's not make, self-inflicted errors here.
Yeah, there's assumptions that are inaccurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I will gladly talk with Steve about trying to get, we'll take a look at those first couple of presentations to see if we can.
Yeah, I suspect the
Yeah.
government overview probably don't, at least our board probably is aware of it.
Mhm.
I've previously attended those, so unless it's useful for the town,
Okay.
we'd be happy with striking it.
And then I will also bring up the idea of adding agenda items around shared goals and shared vision.
The town might, because they're new counselors, right? That's a pretty new council. They may not understand. Like, even when I came to this board, there's a ton of stuff that I brought assumptions from the council that is factually inaccurate because it's a different form of government. Like, them understanding, like, we can't vote for things the way they can. Like, we have to go back to the residents a lot more often.
Yeah.
They have a lot more authority to, like, to expend budgets.
Yeah, that would require some work from Todd, which I don't think is part of the
Yeah.
presentation, I presume.
What specifically you asking?
So I think what Phil was saying, that forms of government and overview could include how the town is authorized to, what they're authorized to spend
Yep.
and raise money in. And there's certain aspects of that, of how we're authorized to raise money
Right.
and spend, that he wasn't fully aware of. So if we were going to share that with them, it would be
Yeah, and when I came on the board, the first meeting I had that expressed forms of government was all about the town government. I'm like, I know that stuff. It's like
Right.
the nuances of a school
Sure.
budget.
Yeah, this is my first rodeo with this particular presentation. When I spoke to Steve about it, he goes, yeah, we have an agenda, it's the same one year over year, so that's kind of where this started from. So
I don't want
let
to
me,
either.
Exactly.
let me,
Maybe the issue, right?
let me have some conversation. Certainly, I'm not averse to putting in a section on how the school district functions and some of the differences between how decisions are made at school district versus town and that kind of thing. So I'm sure Steve and I can coordinate. Let me talk with Steve and see what we can do.
I think
Okay.
it'd be primarily on the financial side of the school, obviously. rather
Sure.
than-
Yep.
yeah. I would presume, I don't think the town would care much about or as much about the policies. So, all right, any other discussion on the joint meeting?
Sean came in.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Sean, yeah, you did. Welcome to second meeting. Did
Thank
you
you.
have a chance to look at the agenda at all?
A lot of stuff that I didn't even know what was being talked about.
We usually don't either, so you don't feel bad. Do you have we have another copy of the agenda somewhere?
Here, I got one.
Send over one for everybody if you want to share that. We did skip the superintendent, or excuse me, the student rep report. Did you have anything you wanted to report on?
There's just still not much, obviously, in summer. I know that the 8th grade, incoming freshman and incoming 6th grader orientation is on the 23rd, but and also student government day is also on the 23rd. But other than that, not much. Soccer season starting up also. Fall sports.
That's right.
This
Fall
fall sports
are
meeting was
starting next
yesterday.
week, right? So
Yeah.
5 to 7 p.m. next week, soccer for people who haven't signed up yet. I don't know. the only sport I know about the schedule. No, great, thanks, Sean. And thank you for reminding me. So the item we just talked about was we try to annually have a joint town council school board meeting. Certainly welcome to attend with the rest of us. And it's should I give another copy of the agenda?
Yep. Okay.
Pass this along, but
You can't mind.
it's just a chance for us to get together, talk about common goals, etc. So hopefully what we were talking about made sense. I know you came in a little late on that. Next up, presentation was adequacy aid.
Yeah. So you should have a report in your packet. It's just a quick summary. We on end of July, the DOE sent what's called the embargoed aid data. Basically, what that means is it's sending it to superintendents and business administrators to review it, to look for any kind of mathematical, anomalies that they want to get corrected. And then we had until August 4th to report those things. And then after that, the state then takes whatever input and they adjust the data. Basically, what they've said is starting August 8th, I can preliminarily share with you what the data is, and then the DOE has set a goal for themselves to get it to us by August 21st officially, but statutorily they have to have it to us by September 1. So what you have in front of you is just a summary of adequacy aid, just for people's edification. We get money from the state in two different ways. One is called SWEPT, which stands for statewide education property tax. So basically that is money collected locally that we keep in Newmarket finance. So it's a tax rate that is part of the set tax rate. The other form of aid that we get is called adequacy aid, and that is calculated based on a per pupil cost. It's roughly $4,100 per student in what's called our ADM, which is our average daily membership. So those two numbers added together are what is the total amount of aid that comes to Newmarket through the state. So the first three columns that are presented in this chart are the same three columns that were shared. You may remember in our budget deliberative session we had a chart that had the blue and the orange, and I think I used the term blue is good, orange bad. I think that was my so basically what it boils down to is the more adequacy aid we get, the less we are collecting locally. So it's a positive for us. So if you look at what we projected for this fiscal year, the 24 fiscal year, you can see that for SWEP, statewide education property tax, we were anticipating $1,973,497. And for the adequacy aid, we were anticipating $2,300,645 for a total of $4,274,142. When we built the budget, you may recall we spent a lot of time talking about the gap that was creating, because if you go back to the previous year in 2023, you see the adequacy aid number was $3,067,000. So it was significantly more than what we were estimating. So obviously that was a negative when we were doing budget time. The current and very likely dollar figure we're going to get is actually in the adequacy column is going to actually be somewhere around $306,000 more than we budgeted for. What does that mean to us? Obviously, when we build our budget, where we can only spend what we budget for, so we can't just take the adequacy aid and spend it without having a special meeting. So we really have, the reason why I'm sharing this with you now is to get you to start thinking about, do we want to simply say, okay, that $306,000, we'll just take it in and it will be a part of the year-end fund balance and just use it to reduce taxes? And for quick mathematical references, it's roughly 10 cents on the tax rate for every $100,000 that we return. So if we would return $300,000 at the end, that's roughly 30 cents on the 1,000. It reduces taxes to the community. So that's one option we have, to just simply use it for tax relief. If, however, we decide we want to use it for some other purpose, we have to hold a special meeting, and there's a process that we have to go through that. It's not insurmountable, but we can't just spend it because that's what came our way. So this gives you sort of the picture of where we're likely to be. Obviously, the next time we meet, I will know absolutely 100% for sure, but the numbers here are pretty solid. There was really nothing in our calculations that was of concern. Questions?
Is this using the formula that was passed in the last legislative session?
Yeah, it's actually, I'd be happy to share with you the multiple pages of spreadsheets where they go through a calculation. You probably heard a lot of conversation about the trying to do it more from a targeting communities. They use the free and reduced lunch counts more, and so the idea was to try to make sure money got where it was needed most. So when you look at the calculations, no surprise, like Manchester, places that have a higher percentage of students that are in that free and reduced lunch category are getting more. Everybody saw some level of an increase, because basically what happened was the legislature increased the per pupil adequacy amount from about $3,800-ish up to $4,100. So it was going up for everybody, but some districts made out much better. But from the perspective of where we thought we were and where we are, we're to the good by $306,000.
And then can I ask, big picture range? It is going down significantly over the past 2 years, 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Is that because of losing money from the pandemic, or is it because of general trends in the state?
It's more a function, at least in the last couple of years, it's more a function of the variables they're using to calculate. Our average daily membership, as we've discussed, is going down. So we have fewer students. So therefore, however many it is times 4,100 is less than it would have been when we had more students. So that's fundamentally what's happening. But then the other piece is the interaction of the calculations around free and reduced lunch counts, which, by the way, as we enter the start of school, the more families that take advantage of and are eligible for and receive free and reduced lunch actually not only benefits those families, it also benefits us in the calculation from state revenues.
Which we lost a lot of during the free lunch during the pandemic.
Right. So those are the factors I think that are playing the biggest role in it. That, and quite honestly, the state legislature has to just make a decision on the level to which they're going to consistently fund education. I don't think it's this obviously there's the Conval lawsuit and all these discussions around what constitutes adequate education. I mean, on a very personal level, I mean, the idea that $4,100 is considered the funding for an adequate education is flat out absurd.
Has that changed at all this year?
It's a little bit higher than it was before. That's about 300. So it was 3,800 per kid. Now it's 4,100. So the definition of adequacy is certainly a big topic of discussion until that gets resolved. And I don't know. I think the one advantage we have here is in New Hampshire, it's a biennial budget. So what we're getting this year, we can probably very safely assume we're getting the same amount next year too.
Do we know if we've, I won't say caught up to, but if our free and reduced lunch enrollments are similar to what we were pre-pandemic?
They're definitely not. They're definitely
Still.
not. No. There's it's very challenging to reach out to people and get them to fully take advantage of it, which is unfortunate. But yeah, we're definitely not at the level we were. I don't have them off the top of my head, but I know Jenna was telling me we're still down.
Is that on an absolute basis or a proportional or both?
I mean, basically, it's a percentage of whatever your ADM is calculated at, and so the ADM is calculated through multiple days, and they come up with a set number, and then whatever percentage of that is free and reduced,
It's the percentage that's going down.
Yeah, so our percentage is, I think it's less than 10%. It's like 9%, maybe, something like that.
Do you know what we were percentage was before? Ish.
I can pick a number, but I don't know with certainty. I just know that from Jana's calculations, that we're definitely down still.
Which, I mean, obviously, so the economic demographics of the town could have changed, but they probably haven't changed that substantially to warrant that. And I know the SAU, or the business offices, just tried a litany of ways to try to reach out to people.
All right.
Any other thoughts on the preliminary adequacy aid numbers?
And again, this is not official until the state says it is, but it gives us something to think about.
I mean, we don't have to decide now, but my initial inclination, if we do have around $300 extra, we know that we're going to be losing some, in all likelihood, some grant funding for some social counselors, social workers. I can't think of the right term.
Social workers, yeah.
Social workers. Something maybe we may want to consider, because clearly there's still a huge issue with mental health within our student population.
Yeah.
In our school and the U.S. in general. All right, moving along, discussion items. Anyone have any correspondence they've received or would like to share? We have the draft fiscal year 25 budget timeline. I can present that if you'd like. but
Yeah, I mean, it's
straightforward.
it's an attempt based on the DRA's proposed calendar to try to start plugging in all the dates that we have to keep in mind. I mean, probably the most important thing to keep in mind is March 12th is sort of the voting day, and then you back away from there. Typically, our deliberative session is this first Saturday in February, so you got to figure that, and then you back up from there. So you can see, as is always, I get when we discussed this at the leadership meeting yesterday, the reaction was, well, why do we have to do it so early? And and some of it is because of the fact that in Newmarket we have a budget committee that we have a deadline to get something in front of them by. Typically, it's that the week after Thanksgiving is typically when we're presenting. So we kind of have to. Everything is front-loaded officially from a legal standpoint. Our proposed budget isn't due really until second week of January, but it's just stuff to keep in mind. We have started the process, by the way, and we did have quite a bit of conversation yesterday about our new financial software and how much smoother it's going to be, and people are very excited at the prospect of having easy access to financial information. Just to reiterate, it's going to take us a couple of years to get all the information into it that we will get full benefit from, but the ability to navigate things is a lot easier than the old system.
The October 16th date, is that the day we would meet during the business day?
I'm trying to find it.
Are you concerned about the time? I think it's just a placeholder. I wouldn't worry about that.
I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, I think what we need to have some conversation about.
Yeah.
It's just it's basically roughly when we did it last year.
Okay.
So I think we just have to have a conversation at some point, probably maybe in the September 7 board meeting. We have that as an agenda. Just pick the dates that we want to work with.
Yeah, I'll tell you on the personal level, the earlier we had that discussion, the easier it would be. So.
One very small nitpicking point, your last two dates on the first page are time traveling into the past,
Oh yeah, that's not a good thing.
Oh, only one of mine.
which if we have a DeLorean, okay, fine. but-
Or a TARDIS.
Yeah, either way, I'm flexible.
We didn't say it was only a proposed timeline, and since
Oh, I see.
you've clearly established that we can't time travel, we're going to have to change it.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, or learn how to time travel.
So, put the science faculty on it.
Exactly. All right. Budget timeline. And did you have any goals for the 25 budget process?
Can I just throw out a couple of?
Sure, absolutely.
So obviously, one of the things that we need to do as a group is establish a budget goal. Just refresh your memory, last year the goal was an increase of no more than 4%, and that's what we used as our guide. that were what you wanted to do again, that would certainly be a workable goal, and that would be great. A couple of things I want you to keep in mind as you think about budget. As Gary already mentioned, we do have a couple of positions that are currently grant funded that we will be needing to make some decisions on as to whether we roll them into the local budget, which does obviously have an impact on the local budget. So that's roughly $220,000 of cost that if we maintain those positions, we have to find. Other things to keep in mind, on the plus side, obviously, I just told you we have 306,000 more revenue than anticipated, so that's a variable. And then the other big variable is, remember the para contract, which was negotiated, was not included in the operating budget. It was a separate warrant, so the cost of the para contract has to be rolled into the local operating budget, and the cost of it is now part of that. It's a number, I don't have the number in front of me, it's a number in the $350,000-ish range.
Yeah, I mean, that, I guess, to me would be helpful. If you could, not right now, obviously, but maybe by the next meeting, what do we have that is pre-existing, approved by the voters and baked in?
Yeah.
That's already going to
What
be
does
an
that mean in terms
increase?
of percent?
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was just looking at.
And I think,
What,
too, we have an
25 million?
opportunity right now that between having a vision of the graduate coming out here early fall and having an administration that's going to, like, be consistent, like, it would be nice, too, to figure out what is it going to cost to have a district that we envision. Based on all of that, with that in mind, though, I am uncomfortable with, like, pie-in-the-sky ideas. Like, I want responsible, if that makes sense. Sustainable, that's the word I'm looking for.
So again, we don't need to set a goal tonight by any means, but we need to start thinking about it. Ideally, we could be ready to set one on September 7th, and I can absolutely provide you all the specific details you're looking for, because obviously the work of actually developing the budget is going to take place in the month of September, and if we don't do it on the 7th, then it's late September before we have that goal.
Which is in essence our next meeting.
Yes. Unless we wanted to meet before the joint meeting, which would be an option. If people wanted to just have a meeting solely for the
It may be
purpose of
useful to have
having
a
budget
workshop
policy.
just to talk through thoughts.
If we really want to leave that meeting in September with a decision,
Yeah.
I would like
Yeah.
people to be more educated.
Yeah, I don't see how we could without having some sort of meeting prior to that. A workshop of some sort
Before
before the joint. I mean, it could be after, but that would be tight.
the joint meeting's on the
23rd.
like, I'm on vacation next week, so it'd be physically impossible.
But we could, I mean, if it's information you want with just to be able to ask questions, Janet and I could very easily put together a quick presentation on what the various variables are, answer your questions. Down and dirty, that's the only thing we talk about. And then you can leave there with information, and then with the idea that on September 7th, you come ready to have a conversation about the goals.
The 23rd's a Wednesday, so that Thursday's still open if we were tied to doing it on a Thursday.
We have a policy meeting on the 24th.
At 4.
At 4, yeah. So I could do back to back. I don't know.
We have a CIP
Actually,
meeting
that'd be harder
at
for
3
me. I mean,
o'clock.
CIP that afternoon earlier.
Yeah.
It's a lot of.
Personally, I think I can wrap my head around it. Again, I just want to get, before we do anything policy, curriculum, new, jazzy, fancy, interesting, just what is the basic lay of the land?
Yeah.
Mhm.
What is the increase going to be now, just based on the stuff, like Dan said, that is already improved?
Yeah.
Yep.
The, what do they call it? Breathing
Like-
room, or what was that
If
term?
it comes back that
Confused,
there's a
but yeah.
3% bump already.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
we can't, like, say, okay, flat, without knowing it's going to have, like,
Right.
massive implications.
Right.
Like,
I mean, it's going to be sort of similar to, in principle, to if you were doing the default budget calculation.
Yeah.
It's existing baseline plus things that.
Yeah, I think that's highly doable, and it's a fairly quick calculation, because there's just known variables. We can just create a chart, show you what the known increases are going to be, and then assume everything stays the same and say, okay, this is what it would look like.
And I mean, it does feel like vision of the grad is also such an important input that that's going to be coming a little bit later, right? Than when it's hard to set budget goals until we know, like, hey, what do we actually need to operationalize via vision of the graduate? Like, it's almost, you know what I mean? Like, vision of the graduate, like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that can come out of that we just wouldn't be able to bring to bear on a budget goal right now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm wondering if this is like a catch our breath, like, figure, like,
Yeah.
like, you know, like, have the increases that are, like, to keep the operation and, like, use the next year to figure out, okay, like, how do we operationalize vision of a graduate via the budget?
Yeah, I would be surprised, I think you will have a vision of a graduate in front of you to approve in October. So you'll have that. I would be surprised if we would be really ready at that point to say, here's what it means operationally. And
Right,
this is what
yeah.
we need. I think in the first year, we're probably talking more structural change that doesn't necessarily have a significant financial impact. So I think, to your point, you're really talking subsequent years where you start to say, okay, well, how do we roll that in?
But, like, to me, that leads to the whole, like, let's not make a whole bunch of adjustments, like, budgetary now. Like, if we know that in the next year, vision of a graduate's going to come to bear and it's going to help influence the budget.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm comfortable keeping it flat with the exception of a social worker. We're going to have to make a decision. And
Well,
maybe,
and the
maybe it has
contractually
paid.
obligated increases.
Well, yeah, obviously, yeah. But those are,
We
as
have-
you said, baked in, right? So, and if we have the money for a social worker, which it seems like we do, then it would require a special meeting, but that's not a huge hurdle. And it could be part of a regular meeting for that matter.
Well, the impact of the social worker won't come until next year, so we won't have to, it basically, this sum that I'm telling you is for the 23-24 year. We're
Oh,
talking
yeah, yeah,
24-25.
yeah.
So
Yep,
the,
you're
the-
right.
the assumption is we will have that in budget planning. We'll know what that is.
Yeah.
So we'll assume that in
Yeah.
planning and incorporate that in. So yeah. But there's no question, we could very easily give you pretty straightforward, here are the costs that are absolute, that are beyond our control, that we need to absorb. And this is what the cost of doing that along with just status quo is, and what does that look like? So you can have that as a starting point and say, what percentage is a reasonable target, given all that?
Sounds good.
Okay.
So it sounds like we do need a
Well, I mean,
quick meeting or get that in writing. We can get that in email if people want, or people are going to have questions. And
I mean, as long as we don't try to conduct a meeting, what if we just had a short budget workshop,
that's fine.
5:15 before it? We could just, I would suggest we meet in the council chamber since we're going to be in the same building
Mhm.
downstairs.
Mhm.
Janet and I can just share with you baseline of information.
That
and-
would-
Yeah.
And then,
We just can't ask questions.
And I mean,
but you can ask questions, you just can't make
Make
any
a
decisions,
decision,
you
true.
can't debate it.
It's a
True,
workshop.
True.
Yeah, it's a
true.
workshop.
and
Yeah.
I mean, to the extent, whatever it is you're going to present, if you can send it out in advance,
Yep.
that would
Yeah.
be really helpful.
Absolutely, absolutely. I frankly, I would be willing to bet that I went and spoke to Jana tomorrow morning. She would have something in my inbox by Monday. That's just the way she is.
I imagine it's
Maybe we
already
should wait till
it's
Monday to
already
talk to
keeping
her.
her up at
Sure,
night.
maybe I
Yeah,
should wait
it's
till
probably
Monday.
already done, but yeah.
Yeah, it's we should
Hope she's not watching this meeting. Should we-
Hope not. Jen, if you're watching, turn us off.
All right, great. Next up, we'll formally open the floor for public comment at 6:10. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment at 6:10. And move into action items. I'd seek a motion to approve the July 27th public and non-public minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Phil, second from Andrew. Are there any comments, discussions, corrections?
So I know our student representative can vote now with the policy, right? If they care to.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's recorded
It's-
as a symbolic
Yeah.
vote, and
Yeah.
it goes into the minutes.
See you
You
at that
don't have
meeting,
to.
So you get your first abstention.
You're supposed to abstention.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that doesn't really make a lot of sense, right?
didn't see anything that seemed weird.
So, because you weren't here for this first one, you have to abstain. So, these are just basically the minutes from the last meeting. And if you're not there for a minute, you can't vote on the minutes because you're not there at the meeting.
That being said, if you do see any correction items, you're
Yeah.
certainly welcome to bring them up.
Yeah.
If you were watching this meeting intently and taking notes. All right, so hearing no discussion, seek a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Motion's already.
Oh, excuse me, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. This has been a while. And student rep,
Abstain.
Aye.
you abstain? All right. So that's 4-0, as Amy's not here. We have the manifests
Yep.
getting around.
Make a motion for approval of the manifest of August 10th, 2023 for the amount of $528,956.97.
Second.
Motion.
Sign it.
Motion by Andrew, second by Phil. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 4-0. I do not believe we have any donations that I'm aware of. And we have any personnel matters?
One, it's really not, I usually don't report on it, but since I was telling you about our struggles with paras, we did have one para leave to take a professional teaching position, which is good for her, but, so Catherine Walden has resigned.
Do we need to accept that?
No, you don't.
No?
I just wanted to tell you about it
Okay,
because
good.
we're struggling for space.
And I presume this is for non-public? Or is this, or is this, no, or is that for this meeting?
Oh, yeah, that would be, actually, that would need to be a non-public thing.
Okay, yep.
It'd be short.
DC. All right, with that, I'd seek a motion to go into non-public session to discuss food debt request under RSA 91A32C.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Phil, second by Dan. Roll call vote. Andrew Hammaker,
Aye.
Gary Swanson, aye. Dan Smith,
Aye.
and Phil Nazaro.
Aye.
With that, we are in non-public at 6:13 PM.